Welcome to the end of course review for the Algebra 1 air test. So on the Algebra 1 air test, there are core areas that are tested, and that's what we have outlined on this slide here. The biggest category is actually going to be the functions category. And so if you find yourself reading here and you're not really certain what these things are, that would kind of give you a starting place to where to go and review what is a function, what do functions look like how do we write functions, um, making sure you're okay with questions that apply functions and solving equations and inequalities through graphs. That is the biggest part of your algebra air test. The next biggest part deals with numbers, quantities, equations, and expressions. So polynomials, expressions, writing, creating equations, writing systems of equations. This also deals with exponents. These are all up here in this section, and it's a pretty big chunk as well. And the smallest area is statistics. So there are, of course, everything in your algebra course can be tested. These are just the sections that are emphasized. So this is where you probably need to really focus your review. The good news is that you are given a formula sheet. It is provided, and there are some really nice things on here. You have some conversion references as far as your units. There are several formulas on here as far as area, there's circumference of a circle, there is volume formulas, and it has a key to kind of remind you what your different variables represent. There's also some right triangle relationships here that you probably won't need too much of because that deals more with geometry. The bad news is that there are plenty of things that you do need to know on your air test, but they are not on the formula sheet. So what we have done is we have kind of put together some more of those things that you do need to know, and we've put it on a separate formula sheet for you that we've posted on the website. And these are things that you do need to know that are not on your formula sheet, and they're not provided. So you need to start working on making sure you know these. So up here, these are your exponent properties. So for example, this property right here, you might see it's supposed to be a 5, the second power times 5 to the 5 to the third power here. This says if both of your regular numbers are the same, which they are, they're both 5s. So your answer would be that 5, and you just add your exponents. So 2 plus 3 happens to be another 5. So that's just kind of a reminder of how to use these rules. If we scroll down, there's some review on slope-intercept form. That's kind of important. And you can see it written as an equation, y equals mx plus b, or this is your function notation, mx plus b. And it kind of reminds you what m is, what b is, and you've got the picture over here. And there's also information on the quadratics and factoring, which is another large part that is tested. So I would recommend going over these. If you don't know them, like star them. You can make flashcards with them if you want. Look over them every day, at least once a day, if not multiple times, just to make sure you know these for your air test. Okay, on this slide, you'll see something that kind of looks like a calculator, but I just really wanted to remind you that your answers may need to be typed and entered into the computer using something like this, and it's not meant to be a calculator. So if your answer was 10, like you could type in 10, or you could click with your mouse. You could click 1, 0, but this is not your actual calculator. The calculator that is provided on your air test will be like up at the top of the screen somewhere, and it is not this particular box here. All right, that being said, you do have questions that are kind of like if you are taking algebra in ALEX or even an Odyssey where There are the technology enriched questions where your answers aren't just a number that you type in or a fraction that you enter. There are going to be questions that ask you to plot points, to graph lines. They may have you fill in the blank or select multiple answers. So just make sure you are reading those questions very carefully. And that brings us to our TI-84 calculator review. There is the provided calculator on the air test software. And it's not a bad calculator. It's got some really good parts to it. But it's really hard to prepare for because there isn't really any preparing for the graphing part of that calculator. The state test provides just a regular generic calculator that you can practice with, but they don't provide the graphing part of it. So the TI-84 calculator is one that you can use on your air test. And the nice thing about this is that you can prepare for this calculator ahead of time. So it really is worth taking the time to know some of the different features of this TI-84 calculator. So if you are not familiar with it, this is the TI-84, which you will have access to when you come in and take your algebra test. And it may be turned off, so the first thing you'll want to know is just the on button, pretty standard. Some things you will need to know is how to enter fractions in the calculator. Well, fractions are just division, so the easiest way to enter them is just say if we had the fraction 7/8, 7 divided by 8, and it will automatically use the fraction form. Just the division sign automatically uses the fraction bar because they are one and the same. And if you push enter, it will automatically make it into a decimal for you. Say you've done some sort of a large calculation on the calculator and it just automatically gives you the decimal, but your air test says we want you to give us the answer as a fraction. Then what you would simply do is you will go into the math menu. So you'll push the math button and you'll notice the very first thing says frac. That's exactly what we want. Go ahead and push enter and it says take that answer, whatever that decimal was, and turn it into a fraction. You'll hit enter again and it will convert it back into a fraction for you, and it will be the simplified form of the fraction. So even if you have a fraction, say 15 divided by 21, and you need that to be simplified because it is not. The calculator will do it just by simply going math, frac, and enter again, and it will simplify your fractions for you. So very, very handy to know. The other part that you really need to know with this is how to graph on this calculator. And that is this entire row of buttons up here. Starting with all the way over to the left, that is y equals. And this is where you will put your equation in. You need to know this button right here is for your variable. So let's say you need to enter in the equation 2x plus 1. You'll push the button 2 and then x, and you'll see it puts it right up there, plus 1. So you've entered in your equation to graph, and then you'll come all the way over to the right and hit the graph button. And it does exactly what you would think it does. And we can see a bigger version over here on the right. Some really cool things that the calculator will do. You can trace along this line using these little arrow buttons and just kind of see what does the line do in given values. Kind of limited in usefulness. Up above here in graph, you see in blue it says table. So anything in blue you have to hit the second button to get to. So second and graph, and it will give you a table of values based off of where your cursor currently is. And you can scroll up and down to look at your values. So I know I had moved my cursor quite a ways from 0. Here are your values that are more reasonable to look at in the table. Let's go back to the graph. Say you need to find an intercept. Well, it will do that as well. If you go over here in blue, you see calc. So second, calc, that is your calculations menu. It will calculate values. It will calculate your intersection, which is here in 5. That's if you have more than one equation. If you are working with quadratics, it may ask about a minimum or a maximum. It will calculate that for you. And an interception, another intercept, I should say, another word for that is 0, and it will calculate that. You can either push number 2 directly because that's what number you want, or you can use the arrow button to go down and then hit enter. And the way this intercept works is that it's going to ask, well, where is the left part of it that you want? So I'm going to come all the way over here because I know that is to the left of what I want. I'm going to hit enter. And where's the right of it? So if I want to go for this x-intercept right there, I just need to move to the right of the x-intercept. I'll push enter. Now, for whatever reason, it says guess. I really have no idea why. You're just going to push enter to skip that. And then it just perfectly goes right to where your x-intercept is, and it tells you the coordinates of your x-intercept. And if I wanted to do that again for my y-intercept, I can absolutely do that. Just going again, second, calc, choose my 0, but this time I would put on the left side and the right side of my y-intercept, and it will calculate that for me. So it's a really useful function of the calculator. It will do it for you. And sometimes if you graph this line and you go to the graph, you may not see it show up. So you may need to also work with this zoom button, and you've got a zoom in and a zoom out function here. It does exactly what it says it does. If we zoom in, hit enter, wherever your little cursor's at, that's where it's going to zoom in around. So say, okay, this is where we want to zoom in. So it really just kind of separates your x and your y-intercept a little bit better. Or you can also zoom out. That is number 3. And say, you graph and you don't see anything. So you probably want to zoom out. Now, it just so happens we see everything on this line because it graphed perfectly anyways, so that really was not an issue for this one. Say you've messed with the zoom and you're like, ugh, I just want to get it back to normal. You go back to zoom, and number 6 is standard. That's just resets it. So there's back to our normal screen. That is the main part of your calculator that you'll need is the graphing part. Also, one last thing, to get out of the graphing screen, you just need to quit. This quit button is highly useful. So because it's in blue, second, quit. And the last thing you'll need on this calculator is matrices, because sometimes you have systems of equations and solving them by a matrix is super easy on the calculator. You will go, there's a matrix menu. It's in blue again, so you have to hit second and matrix. And this is your matrix menu. So let's say you have, I'm going to minimize this just for a second. Say you have an equation. X plus 4 equals 10. And you have a second equation, 7x minus 5 equals 15. Now, I've just made up these numbers so that, you know what, you can tell I just made them up because there's supposed to be y's in there. I just made up these numbers, so it's probably not going to have a very nice answer. But say you've got a system of equations and you need to solve them. So what you're going to do is you're going to make one matrix out of just the coefficients of these numbers. And then you're going to make another matrix out of the answers. And you're going to put this in matrix A and then matrix B. And then you're going to use the calculator. It's a very simple calculation. This is another one you kind of need to know. You're going to use the calculator to put this in, and it will solve your matrix for you. So how do we do that? Let's bring the calculator back up. You're going to go over to edit using your arrow keys, and you're going to say, okay, let's edit the A, and we need two numbers by two numbers. So we're going to make it a 2, enter by 2, enter matrix. And then we have 2, enter 4, enter 7, enter -5. And this is your negative button. It kind of doesn't make sense that it's separate from your subtraction, but that's just the way this calculator is. There we have it. There is our first matrix. And we have to quit out of this menu. So second quit, go back into the matrix, second matrix. You are going to go back to edit, but this time we want to edit B. Now B is a 2 by 1 matrix, 2 rows, 1 column. So 2, enter, 1 is fine, and you can see it matches what we have. If you accidentally put 1 by 2, you will notice it will not look like your equation, and you will know you flip-flopped your numbers. All right, so let's put in 10, let's put in 15. Our numbers are good. Second, quit. And now it's time to put our formula in, a to the -1 power b. So you're going to go back to the matrix, lots of in and out of the menus. And now you just push, okay, we want matrix A. So go ahead and enter, and it automatically puts matrix A into your calculator. And it just so happens that the same button you've been using for the matrix menu is your -1 exponent. See, they planned that for a reason. Go back to second matrix. This time go down to number 2, which is B. There you have your calculations, and you just push enter again. It solved your matrix for you. Now, I did warn you because I just made up the numbers off the top of my head that it wasn't going to be a very pretty answer. And what do you know? Not a very pretty answer. But this first number is X and the second number is Y, and it just does it in alphabetical order because that's the way your equations are. So this first one is X and the second one is Y, and that is technically the solution to the equations I just made up. But again, very handy to know on your graphing calculator. And now let's go ahead and talk about your general review. We did go over several of these questions in class for the air review session that we held. But we've also provided an answer document that goes over the answers for all of these questions. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to separate this out to a different video. If you would like a walkthrough of those questions, that will be another video for you to watch. But we're going to wrap this video up here, just that if you wanted the most of the information that we did in the air test without the questions, because you can look at the questions on your own and you can look at the answers on your own and you don't have to be tied up on the computer or watching this video. We're just going to separate those out. But you know, if you are interested in watching the video for those questions, you know, just make sure you go back to the website and check that video out.